Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin momentarily. Please silence any electronic devices and remove any proxy badges at this time. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cadet First Class Isabella Horning. It is my privilege to welcome you to this 29th Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium, Polaris Hall Forum. Our honored guest speaking for this afternoon session is Ms. Abigail Manning. Ms. Manning is the founder of Create Awareness, Change Lives, Inc., creator of the Authentic Health Curriculum, workshop facilitator, and national speaker. She focuses on building healthy and prosperous organizations through cultural intelligence, mental fitness, and enhanced life skills. She combines an Indiana University double major and ongoing cognitive, social, and behavioral studies with firsthand resiliency skills learned by overcoming traumas of childhood abuse, domestic violence, and PTS. She is a proud mother of a U.S. Marine daughter and son, and is keenly aware of military culture. Ms. Manning has a heartfelt passion for the people she serves. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to present to you Ms. Abigail Manning.
Thank you. When I say that my dad was dirt poor, it's kind of an optimistic statement, because that indicates that my dad lived in a house with walls and a dirt floor. My dad was not that lucky. My dad was born into extreme poverty. When he was a boy, he lived in a canvas tent that was next to a ditch, and that's where they got their water. In the tent, he lived with his mother, his father, and his 4 siblings. His story is one I have never told, I have never shared, not in his speech, not even with good friends, and not even with my children to this level of detail. I'm sharing it today because I feel it's time. And it's also a great full circle look at the importance of human dignity, respect, and moral courage to defy the odds. So to understand my father and his story and his fight for human dignity, we have to look at where he came from. My dad, Walt Manning, was born near Mother's Day in May of 1928, just in time for the Great Depression. He was quickly followed by 2 sisters and then 2 brothers. And during the Depression, his father was gone for long stretches of time out looking for work, which put a lot of responsibility on my dad's shoulder as the man of the house, or the man of the tent, and for 5 children. His mother would try to go get some extra work by doing laundry for other families. And it was one of these days that she went across the street to go to the laundry house. And unbeknownst to her, Mona, my aunt, at 3 years old, ran out into the road to follow her. At that exact same time, a traveling salesman was going along the road and hit her. When he saw the poverty that they were living in, and he saw this little girl in the hospital bed in a full body cast with all these broken bones and told that she may never walk again, he was poor, but he knew he had a car and he knew he had a job. So he scraped together the money and paid for the hospital bills for her. That man never forgot Mona and my family of origin. When he came into some money 5 years later, my dad was in 7th grade, and he sent $500. With that $500, my grandmother bought a piece of land, and with my dad, they built this structure. There were no electricity, this was years later, there was no electricity, no running water, no central heat, or anything like that. But they were off the ground. And as my dad said, it was a 1-room shack, but it was home. So my dad had to face a lot of human indignity of poverty, being hungry, but nothing got to him as sometimes the things that were said to him. He was often called a dumb, dirty Indian, and he felt that cultural bias a lot. Dumb, he knew he was not dumb. He had a photographic memory, and anything put in front of him, he could instantly remember it and perfectly file it away so later he could have full recall. Dirty? Well, let's be honest. He didn't have running water. He used ditch water. He probably was pretty dirty. That's pretty fair to say. Indian? That's also fair to say. His grandmother was Cherokee. But the thing that bothered him the most is when people looked at him and instantly thought he was lazy. When he was called lazy or good for nothing, that is what really upset him, because he's anything but lazy. To give you some examples about my dad, as a kid, he got a newspaper route, and he found out that with his newspaper route, he could buy a whole loaf of bread. He felt exhilarated and empowered. His little skeletal body had just a little bit more nutrition in it. Being the smart kid that he is, he's like, wait a minute. If I run, I can do 2 paper routes. I can earn twice. And then, he said, if we all sacrifice and we go back to 1 loaf of bread, that means I can use the extra money towards a bike. And with the bike, that means I can do 3, maybe 4 paper routes in the morning before I go to school. And that is exactly what he did. And he was able to bring home meat for the family. He was able to bring home bread and even milk. And they were so happy, and he was feeling so proud of himself providing for his family. Until one day, the neighborhood bullies stole his bike. They rode the bike so hard that they broke it. And when they broke it, they threw it in the dump. That day, when my dad finally found his bike down in the dump, something shifted in him. When he told me the story, you could see it. There was a hard edge on his face. There was anger in his eye. He couldn't understand why the kids would do this, and he couldn't have any way of expressing it. So that was the day that he went from being Walt Manning to Buster. Buster was his new name because everywhere he went, he busted things up, he broke things, he became a huge bully to his sisters and brothers. With the bike gone, he had to figure out a new way of bringing in money. He found out about the lettuce fields. So he went down and he's like, okay, I can make 10 cents for a whole row of harvesting lettuce. So he worked really, really, really hard one day. He got all the way down to a row that's a mile long. He came back and he started working up another row. He walked away that day with 11 cents in his pocket. He was so excited, so exhilarated. He went out and he bought a loaf of bread, not a bike, not that much money. Come on, people. We have optimists in the crowd. Yay! He bought a loaf of bread and he went to the butcher and he bought a pound of ground beef. And he was so happy because he was going to provide for the family that night. And so this kid walked home. But the problem was the butcher saw him as a different person. He saw a dirty, smelly little kid. And by the time my dad got home, he was carrying it. The butcher had watered down the meat so much that it had saturated the paper, and the paper fell apart, and then there was no structure to this once beautiful package of white paper with white string wrapped all up like a gift he was going to give his mom. It all literally fell apart in his hands and was all on the ground. And by the time he got home and his mom cooked it up, he realized there's no food. This is nothing. All that hard work, all the effort I put in is gone. And then what he really realized, he thinks it was the last time that he cried, because I never saw my dad with any tears in his eyes. By the time my dad was 14, he was working in the mines. My dad was anything but lazy. And even as a little kid, he was like, this is not the life I want a better life. There's 2 things I'm gonna do with my life. Number 1 is I'm never, ever gonna be poor again. Number 2 is I'm gonna command respect. So even as a little kid, as the engineer he would one day become, he reverse engineered it. And he said, okay, how am I gonna do this? If I never wanna be poor and I wanna command respect, what is that gonna take? And he decided money. Money is the answer. How do I get money? I have to have a really good job. how do I have a really good job? I have to have a really good education. How do I get a really good education? It's by going to a great college. How do I go to a great college? Money. Or go into the military. And that is exactly what he did. So my dad had a fascination with airplanes and flying and everything like that. And so a couple weeks after high school graduation, he marched down to the Army Air Corps and he enlisted. And he delighted when he found out that he didn't eat a poor man's diet anymore. They had steak. He had steak for breakfast, he had steak for lunch, he had steak for dinner, he had steak 24/7. When he enlisted, he was 5'10" and a half, and he was a strapping 131 pounds. I know. With so much steak, he grew to well over 6 feet tall and easily 175. He was lean, and he was muscular, and he was feeling good. He was also feeling pretty smart because he was put in radar school. That was one of his goals, was to learn technology. So at radar school, he went down to Boca, and he was in a 15-week class. And then he did super well in there because he could remember it all right away, right? And so they sent him off to ground school. He was so happy with all the information he learned, the new life, the new intelligence, the new body that he had and everything, that he was happily served his commitment. And it was about that time that the Air Force had started. And they saw him, and they said, hey, before you go into the civilian world, we have even better food over here in the Air Force. And we have even better, newer technology that we're doing and we're developing. And if that isn't enough for you, we'll give you a $150 re-enlistment bonus. He signed up right away, and off he went. He loved being in the Air Force. He absolutely loved it from start to finish. He worked on the guidance system for the Hawk missile. He went to secret bases up in Alaska. He was learning all this new, great, exciting information. And one of the things that he loved the most was being called sir. He loved it. He loved that he could walk into a room and he would have the answers. People with much better educations, people with much higher rank would be coming up to him, and he could dissertate all the information, he could command respect of the room, and he could tell everybody the way it's going to be fixed and done. He craved it. And he did exactly what that little boy wanted. By the time he ended his time with the Air Force, he grabbed his GI Bill and he marched off to Purdue University and earned an engineering degree. From there, it was upward trajectory of success. Right out of college, he worked for Raytheon, he worked for Motorola, he was written up in the newspapers, he was like the hotshot kid of this new technology and everything. But there was one problem. He wasn't being called sir. He wasn't the boss. He had these great ideas, but he was being told, no, that's not gonna work here, and la, 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 la. And so he thought, like that little kid, I have an idea. And so what he did is he would come home from work, he had the wife, the house, the kids, and he would go straight to the basement and he'd start working on his inventions. He'd start working on building acoustic couplers. Those were the big thing in the day. I don't know if anybody here else knows what they were, but I grew up with putting the phone in the acoustic coupler. And so he decided to build his own corporation, and he did. He built a computer corporation that did phenomenally well. So well that he fulfilled that childhood dream of not only seeing pilots, but becoming a private pilot and owning his own private airplane. N65763, you're clear for takeoff. I can still hear it in my head. In fact, this is a picture of him visiting in New Mexico with his favorite uncle. When I was going through photos, it was interesting to me to be able to pull out all these old photos, and I found this one. I know you can't see it right now, right? Like it's the ice cube or whatever they're calling the chapel right now under the covering, but you'll see another photo, so I think that's kind of part of the full circle story that's interesting. And when I saw the story, it's a picture, it's my father, it's me, and it's my firstborn child. And when I looked at this, I thought, you know, there's three real big things I learned from my dad. One is hard work. I'm an incredibly hardworking person. Number two is love of country, absolute love of where we get to live. Number three is you provide for your family, and you do whatever it takes to make that happen. And I taught my daughter that and my son, and I am proud, as Isabella said, that both my kids are US Marines. And so going back to this picture, I realized too how much, preparing for this talk, realized how much he would have loved to have been a cadet here, how much he would have loved to sat in the seats that you get to sit in. Loved that. And what he would have loved even more was to be a professor or a staff or standing right here where I am, to be able to give his knowledge and share his knowledge and tell about all the things that he knows about and all the intelligence he has and all the things he's overcome. My father never did do that. In 2009, my dad died. When my dad died, there was no service, there was no memorial, there was no anybody wanting to gather. Not hundreds of employees that he had over the years, not neighbors, not friends, and because he didn't have any, and not his family. You see, things aren't always what they appear on the outside. And my dad's need for money, my dad's need to command respect, demand respect, and that meant you will obey me, you will do everything it my way, and if you don't, I will squish you. In my dad's world, there is one winner, and all of the rest of us are losers. And he is going to rip you apart, tear you down, beat on you if needed. It didn't matter if you were a 5-year-old girl or if you were the top person of your industry. He was going to shred you in one way or another. He had a volatile temper. He was a very scary man. And it is at my father's hand that I know the first hand of the first 4, the first 5 of the big abuse. Emotional, verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. And the 5th is financial, in case you're wondering. And I couldn't understand as a little girl how. How could this be? How can people treat each other this way? How can anybody be so angry and mad and have all of this, everything that you've wanted, and be so cruel? I just couldn't understand it. And by the time I was 8, I took a vow, looking in my little bedroom mirror, that it ends with me. And whenever I talked about the things that I believed in, the things I believed in now, that I believe in even more now, is that we are to treat each other and ourselves with love, respect, and kindness. I got absolute ridicule. The more I spoke like that, the more angry he would become. He would loom over me, and he would yell at me. And the moment I would start to have any tears in my eyes, he would literally pound on my chest and tell me I've lost all capacity for reasoning. He allowed his anger and no other emotion. So I decided that's not what I'm going to do going forward. That is who I am, right? And I knew that that was my truth, even though I was told that that was a lie. And so when it was time for me to go, I went to Indiana University. He had a rule, we had to go to Big Tens. I don't know what that was about, but we had to go to Big Ten University, and I wasn't going to go to Purdue where he and my mother went. So I went to Indiana University, I studied and I got a double major in communication specializing in cognitive, social, and behavioral. And all that is great. However, when I really started understanding all of this is when, after going through childhood abuse by both of my parents, domestic violence, and being in the pit of PTS. What I did is I looked up and I had full custody and sole custody of this little 5-year-old and 2-year-old. And I was like, yeah, not on my watch. Like, they are gonna have a great life. All of this stuff is not gonna be their life, their truth. And so I put together a program and a curriculum of what I believe in. And so I developed this thing called purple threads. So as you can read, purple threads are limiting personal thoughts connected to past traumas that become physiologically tied to what we think, say, and do. Think, cognitive, say, communication, do, behavioral. And I want to go and explain this to my kids so that what we can understand is that these are the things that have happened to us in the past. Don't dictate where you go. People are going to try to weave lies into you all the time. So the first thing, people always say, wait a minute, I like purple. Don't do that to purple. And I say, it's in honor of purple. Purple is the color of courage. And it takes incredible amounts of moral courage to look within yourself, to see what thoughts that you have, to see what emotions you have, to see how you're influencing other people or impacting or hurting other people. So Purple Threads has 3 major steps to it. The first one is self-awareness. What are my limiting thoughts? If you can think of a negative one, I probably have heard it between my 2 parents, but they usually sound something like, I'm never going to make it, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not creative enough, people don't like me, I don't have personal skills, I don't have the right skills, I'm too old to do this, I'm too young to do this, I'm never going to make it, those kind of things. And we have to understand where they came from. Grooming, gaslighting, bullying, hazing, life experiences. Life is hard, let's face it. There's a lot of trauma and things that happen in our world. We lost over 1,000 homes here in Colorado right around New Year's because of fires. There's a lot of really hard things in this world, and if we're not careful, they weave in these limiting thoughts into our head. And so the second step is self-ownership. I get to choose what I keep in here. I get to choose what I keep in here. And it's not going to be the lies of other people, and no longer am I going to hide behind the lies of people like my dad who want me to play small, who want to believe those things about myself, right? And I own it. If there's a limit on me, it's my limit. It's because I didn't think big enough. I didn't work hard enough. I didn't push far enough. And I am not a victim. I'm a victor. There's the way you look at yourself, develop your mindset skills, because it's a powerful, powerful difference. And it doesn't matter if you were born a dark-skinned boy with poverty, or you're born a white-skinned girl who has a life of luxury from at childhood. I can tell you, we all have purple threads. We all have limiting thoughts. And when we look past the behavior of other people, we look past the meanness or the sadness or the anger or the differences, and we have smart, intelligent brains, and we have kind hearts, and we dig deeper to understand the root of their behavior, why this person acts the way they do, what was in their experience, what was in their life. It makes for new, incredible innovation, deeper teams, more connection with one another. It's amazing what we can do when we do that. And the third step of this is self-commitment. And that's where we do self-care, and we take care of ourselves so that we fill ourselves up, and we make sure we don't get stressed and overwhelmed so that those lies can come back. And every time we see one of those purple threads, we need to have the space to pull them out, and it's hard work. And trust me, it's worth it. 5 years ago, and one day, I launched this, my second company. I had never told anybody before that I had been through any kind of abuse. Even putting it out there, I would shake and cry just thinking about it. I sat where you're sitting, and I never thought I would be on this side of the stage. And it just goes to show that you can be anything that you want. Don't let yourself be limited. Move past the tragedies and the traumas and the limitations, because it's an amazing world out here. And because I spoke truth, and because I lived a life of authentic giving, I got to do things that my dad never has done. I've been asked to speak at Leadex, which is Air University's Leadership Education and Development Experience. I just finished teaching another class here today, and I've taught in the sea. Now you can see the chapel, right? See, full circle story, we're getting around to it. I've been able to teach here, and I've been asked to come and speak at this event and approved. What that tells me is that learning to trust and let go and stand true in your own truth and live with integrity, overcome human indignity, live with respect. And the last step of this is trust. If there was one thing I could help my father do, is learn how to, one, let go and say, Dad, I forgive you. And I truly do. And Dad, I'm grateful. I am grateful for the things that I've gone through. Were they hard? Yeah. Is life hard? Yeah. But unlike what you tried to brainwash me that I was never going to make it, I learned inner strength because I had to overcome my struggles, because I had to face my demons. And it feels really good. It feels really happy. It feels very honoring to be here and share with people my path, because then people say, I was able to do that on my path. And then it builds and builds and builds. And so with trust, Buster was all about not trusting anybody and dividing people and shoving them away and building walls. I'm the exact opposite. I'm about unity. I'm about optimism. And I think that if he could have learned to let go of the injustices and embrace the goodness, he could have started trusting everybody around him. And when you have trust, you have innovation, you have commitment, you have collaboration, you have healthy, thriving individuals and unstoppable teams. It's amazing what happens when you come together. And for me, trust is built on truth, respect, unity, safety, and transparency. Making other people know that they're important and that they're needed. And so as I look at this, I ask you if you want some homework, right? Where's one area you're doing really well in these categories, that you excel? And I'd love for you to celebrate and pat yourself on the back. And I'd like for you to look at somebody on your team who does really well in some of these areas. And then I'd like you to honor them publicly. Hey, I noticed the other day in the meeting, when you stood up and you da-da-da-da-da, that was important, that was impactful. Thank you for doing that. It goes like crazy wildfire through your organization and building others. And then I want you to ask yourself the tougher purple thread question, where am I not good at this? Where do I need to improve? And then figure out who can you ask. If you don't have people coming to you and giving you feedback, you probably haven't built trust within your organization, right? And so with that, keep these ideas in mind, and the goal is always to pull people together, not to push people apart. And so my wish for you is that you will lead with human dignity so everyone knows what that feels like, that you will live with respect not only for yourself, but everyone around you, and that you will love with moral courage. Thank you.
Ms. Manning, thank you so much for your message today. At this time, I would like to open the floor up for any questions. Our in-person attendees can ask questions using the microphones positioned on the right and left side of the floor. Virtual attendees may type a question in the discussion board aligned with this session on the NCLS event platform.
I just had a class with, 200 cadets? And it was, the sapper and things like that. And we've been busy. We taught 2 classes before that. And Dr. Boyd, are you here? For Dr. Boyd's class. And he was like, yeah, I'm in charge of Chinese. I'm like, I don't speak Chinese. He's like, that's okay, you don't need to speak Chinese. I'm like, phew. Tons of questions, please don't be nervous about asking anything. We can talk about trust, resilience, fortitude, overcoming obstacles, or share your own story.
Abigail, thank you for sharing your story and for being with us these 2 days. The forgiveness piece, I think lots of people struggle with forgiveness. Mm-hmm. How did you work up into that point? And then was it after your dad had passed away? And did you forgive your mother and your family, or how did you work through all of that?
Beautiful question. Thank you. Thank you. So forgiveness, it happened overnight, and it was instantaneous, and it was very easy, and I had a party. Obviously, we're laughing, which is good. That's number one skill set, guys, is humor. Let's keep our humor. And that's why I do things like purple threads and stuff and try to make it so that there's also humor along with the hardships. So forgiveness is a hard one, right? And I think that's one of the gifts of purple threads is that you can say, oh, that person had trauma, that person had this. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was born in a really difficult time in life and things like that anyway. But it doesn't mean it's okay. You know, that doesn't mean I say what you did to me is okay, what I deserved is okay. No, it doesn't. What it says is, dang, I wish you could have loved yourself, because if you could have loved yourself, you would have loved me. You would have loved everybody else. He didn't love himself, right? And when you don't love people and you think the world is against you, and the world was hard on him. That's why I opened up with stories like that, because the world is hard. No one just shows up one day as a jerk. That's not how we're born. That's not how life works. But life happens, and over time, we have a choice. And it is hard to stay optimistic. I'll be honest sometimes. It's really hard. But it's a choice I make because that's what I want for the world. That's the vision I want to have. So I choose to forgive him. And there were times I choose to forgive him. So there were baby steps. It was definitely not overnight. It was I choose to forgive him. I choose to understand that you were in pain and that hurt people hurt people. And it's as awful as it is, that simple sentence, hurt people hurt people. Yeah, but I'm a person, no, take yourself out of it. This was a hurt man who was just hurting everybody around him as much as he could. And so it was a process, and it was a lot of work, and I did different modalities. I've done everything from like talk therapy to EFT, tapping. I teach tons of different modalities so that you can find different ways of removing it, because it's not overnight, it's not instantaneous. One of my times, I remember, I called it Red Rocks Rage. I was out on a trail run, I loved a trail run, and there was these huge red rocks, and I was running, and then I was like feeling good, and then I was thinking about him, and I was releasing as I was running, and then I was crying, and I'm like, I don't want to cry over him, and so I jumped on these big red rocks, and I just kind of yelled. And I jumped off, and I'm like, oh, I feel better. And there was a peace. And the funny thing is my dad comes to me a lot of times in airplanes. And so at that moment, a plane went over. And I could have sworn I heard, if I had known better, I would have done better. And it was small pieces like that that I could learn to forgive and let go. And I also learned it doesn't do me any good. If I'm harboring ill will, I have ill will in my thoughts, what I think, say, and do. So it's only making me more frazzled and tired and toxic or tentatively like that person. And I don't want to be that. So I wish you well. So when people come up to me now and they're of not positive nature and they're mean and they're attacking and they're whatever, love and light, wish you well, goodbye. Like healthy boundary lines. But it is a process to get there. And a lot of it is selfish. I want to heal. I want to be well. I want to be the best I can be. And I can't be if I'm carrying around that kind of toxic old hardships. And he couldn't let go of it. And so I chose to let go of it. And I think when you can honor your growth, when I look back and I think what I've done, like that was a gift he gave me. It was a gift. Thank you for asking. Yes, sir.
Ms. Manning, I appreciate the story that you share with us. It's inspirational and a lot of the challenges that you've been through. I appreciate your vulnerability. My question is, from these challenges you've had in the past and even now, when things go wrong, when bad things happen, and because they will continue, what's your go-to? What do you do when things fall apart? And you're trying to remember your own purple threads, and you're in that moment. What do you do to kind of find your stability, to find your peace?
I love it. Thank you. Thanks for the question. So, being a grit and resilience expert, I highly respect the work that you do. And so, for me, it's keep things very simple. When I was that little girl, I said it ends with me. And so that's locked hard in my head. And as an adult raising kids, I came up with a family vow. I treat others and myself with love, respect, and kindness. And I always go back to that. I always go back to what is kind. Kind does not mean that you're weak. So don't mistake my kindness for weakness, right? especially if you're gonna mess with my kids. I mean, I did raise 2 strong people to become Marines. Like, you know, one was HMX-1 Presidential Helicopter Squadron. She was #1 in her boot camp. The other one was a severely dyslexic child in second grade, couldn't even read, and now is Intel and doing extremely well. So what I do is I try to focus on the positivity. I try to focus on what I can control, which is my mindset, which is love, respect, and kindness, and does this thought best serve me? Is this person, not that everybody has to best serve you, helping me or hurting me? And you can quickly see what helps. And putting together a whole bunch of resiliency skills from everything from breathing techniques. Like before this, I did my 1 in, 3 out breathing technique quite a bit. I did some EFT tapping. I reminded myself that, to be honest, as corny as it sounds, I love me. And if I walk out there and I share and they all think I'm an idiot, I still love me. I'm still good. And that's how you build resilience. You're not depending on other people telling you that you're worthy. You already know you're worthy. And when you have that, then you have more courage, and you have more get up and go, and you have more bravery. And when you unite with other people who think like that and support you and encourage you and smile at you and say you can do this, you're unstoppable. So it's just a road bump, and it's perspective. It's like, that's just a road bump. I've been through other things. We will get through this. And so that would be my mindset, is just filling my mind with those positive thoughts and go-tos. And when I am really scared or stressed or weak, having my people I can go to that I trust. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I wanted to ask about trust, and especially trust in an organizational context. So when you have different units that on paper seem to trust each other, but everyone knows there's a lot of mistrust, you bring a facilitator together and put everybody in the same room, and even then there's a whole sort of denial about trust issues. Any best practices for how to manage that situation?
Yes, right? Thank you for the question. It's an excellent one. So I see this a lot. So I've also done coaching, and I've done purple threads for thousands of people. And what I found is that trust, when you connect on a really deep level, it helps. So when I do the purple threads exercise for people and they see that person who's such a jerk or obnoxious or loud or whatever, we dig down, we get authentic, and we dig down to the 7 steps down of why that person is behaving that way. And usually it's something that the rest of us go, oh. And that kind of trust is unshakable, right? That kind of trust is where you can say, I can ignore the behavior, I can ignore the personality differences, I can ignore the differences and things like that. And we also talk about biases, and we talk about ones that are really overt. And how does that serve you? How does that serve anybody? And we have them talk about it. And when people start talking about it, they realize, they start second-guessing themselves. And we talk about subconscious biases. Like, for example, my kids, when I always say, I'm really proud my kids are Marines, 99.9% of the time, even active duty women, military, will say, thank your sons for me, please. Every single time. And it's not because people are rude. And so sometimes to build that trust, we have to show that there is that breakdown in understanding of each other. And then the second step of that is building communication skills, courageous communication skills, authentic communication skills. Words, and part of my curriculum is not shame, blame, and judgment and isolation. And how does that come across? And we talk about like social distances, right? Like, some people have, like, I've been violently attacked from behind. So I don't like that. Like, it's, so when you know the people on your team and you respect people on your team, you say, I don't agree with you, but I respect that that is what you need. I respect that that's where you're coming from. And it builds this authenticity of wanting to collaborate and how important we all need each other. Like, I cannot do math. I'm awful. I'm dyslexic. But an accountant and a bookkeeper are my best friends, right? And I rely on them. Like, we need people that are different, and showing how we need them and how it all fits together as one beautiful big puzzle is exactly, I think, how we build the trust and the communication that we realize how important we are to each other.
Hello, ma'am. My name is C3C Sage Cordy. I'm from Cadet Squadron 28. And my question is, how do you practice self-love and healthy boundary setting in places and organizations where there's not a very good work-life balance, such as the military, where you just don't necessarily have that separation.
So self-love and work-life balance. Healthy, HBL, healthy boundary lines. Okay, perfect. So self-love is one of those things I've already, and I'm gonna go back to purple threads. We all have unworthiness statements in our heads, right? So recognizing what those are, and then seeing where they came from, asking yourself if it's truth. Some of them are truths. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you don't work very hard, you know, like, come on. Like, okay, I could step it up. Like, some of those are truths, right? And then being honest and doing the work. But when you know that you're a good person and you know the value that you bring and you have that self-worth, the self-love just comes. And I know that that can be a really hard battle, especially for someone like me who's been through so much and been told such ugly stuff. It's really hard. But you have to also start with a bridge. If you say, I am lovable, let's just say, but you've come from my experience, your brain knows that your body, you're saying words that are not true, that you're lying to yourself, so the brain rejects it. So you can say, I choose to believe I am lovable. I choose to believe that people love me. And then start looking for it. And then when you see someone who greets you and they wave across the room, and you're like, oh, they do like me. You start looking for information and data that fulfills that and shows that, and then self-love just comes from it. Healthy boundary lines is a sign of self-love. Like, what do you stand for, what do you not? And the best healthy boundary line is the longest sentence I know, which is no. And work-life balance, that is a tricky one. And it's never gonna be 50-50. It's never gonna be absolutely wonderful. And for me, a lot of times when I'm working, even though I worked from out of my home, I'd feel guilt that I wasn't with my kids. And if I was with my kids, I'd feel guilt if I wasn't over here. And there's a lot of that. And that doesn't help anybody. You know, so again, I kind of like the communication. Just communicate with work. I'm really overwhelmed right now. I've got so much on my plate. I'm having this situation with my parents, my, you know, significant other, whatever it is, and communicate that and then say, this is what I need. And that goes back that this is what I need is truly self-love. So when we are taught that we're not supposed to have a voice, that's really hard to do. This is what I need. And that's all tied into healthy boundary lines. So that question is kind of all the same in my head. So I hope I answered it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Manning, thank you again for your time today. We value your perspectives, which have enriched our views of ethics and respect for human dignity. On behalf of our 2022 NCLS participation, the Cadet Wing, and the faculty and staff of the Air Force Academy, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you for all you do, and thank you, NCLS. Amazing organization, and I'm honored to be here. Please reach out anytime, anybody, if I can be of value.
This concludes our session. We would appreciate audience feedback at our testimonial booth on the south side of the Arnold Hall foyer. Also, at the end of your NCLS experience, we invite you to take the culminating survey on the event app or via the link sent in the email after NCLS closes. Thank you and have a great Air Force Day.